How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I got I got two sisters, Kathy and Johnny, and Gary's my brother, and me, I'm the baby in my family.
When he was born, he was not diagnosed right away. My mom used to take him in. She'd say, he's not walking yet. He's not talking yet. And the doctor would just say, now, Mom, don't you worry. When he was about 2, she took him in for an appointment, and it was a different doctor that day. And he said, when are you going to put this child in an institution? Yeah, and that was how they found out. They were totally attached. He was part of our family. She said if they had been told at his birth that he had a disability and that he should be put in an institution, people went along with whatever the doctor said in those days. And they said they may well have done that, not knowing any better. So it was a mixed blessing. When he was very young, there was a private school. I think it was called Baby Louise Haven. So that's how my parents first met other parents. The parents were concerned with these private schools, they could close down. Or they were a school, and what happens when the kids are older. So it was the parents getting together and saying, what about what's going to happen long term for our children, and especially after they are gone. They had the vision of lifetime care and for a community. So the idea of Shangri-La, coming from the book Lost Horizon, kind of a utopia, they bought the property, then they built the school. Over the years, they started building other cottages. Ideally, Greg would be able to live on the property in one of the cottages after they were gone, and would be cared for life.
We had the school program, and then there was the campus, the greenhouse program, and then Greg, Lee, and Steve worked on. There used to be a thing called the Bottle Crew. I don't know if Greg showed you any pictures of Lee Trippett. I don't want to compare them to twins just because Greg and Lee both had Down syndrome. But really, they looked so much alike, and they acted so much alike, and their mannerisms were so much alike. They got along. It was like they almost finished each other's sentences.
Greg and Lee met when Greg was 4 and Lee was 8, and probably back when they were going to that original kindergarten, the Haven. So they were lifelong friends.
Peggy Long, which is Greg's mom, and Shirley Tribbett, and then Mr. and Mrs. Mendez, all kind of took turns with supporting the guys getting around in the community. Whether it was a bowling event, they bowled every single Sunday. They went to church together, but they always did it with all 3 of them.
He lived at home until, I think, 1988. In the meantime, the government started closing institutions. The idea that people would be better off living in the community. Shangri-La eventually had to sell their property because they weren't allowed to live in the cottages out there. So they did eventually get through that roadblock and bought Garlock, and that's where Greg and Lee and 3 other fellows lived for many years.
First, we had them staffed around the clock, and truly it was the group home you wanted to work at in the day, because where else could you go and have fun where it didn't feel like you were working? They were cooking, they were cleaning, they were running their own household, and you were basically there just for intermittent consultation. So at that time we reduced the staffing, and things were well. They didn't need to have somebody there overnight.
He was a very active guy. He was going to Special Olympics every weekend. He goes out of town, and he was once a president of the People First. His routine is like, I gotta wake up at this time, I gotta eat this at this time, I gotta catch my bus at this time, and I have to leave at this time. It's just 2:30, like downtown. I have to be at this Indian Palace restaurant because they give out free pub. I have to be there at 2:30. You cannot break that.
How long has Greg been coming here?
I say it's probably last 15 years.
15 years.
Yes.
And how often does he come in?
Almost every day, 6 days a week. He's coming on for having what? 2 pop?
That's right.
2, right?
That's right.
2 pop.
We tried along many times during the years to kind of break the routine, not on purpose, but just because of circumstance. And we could always count on Greg just to keep going, doing the same thing. The same thing. The same thing. You know, Nick, you've had the opportunity to see his phenomenal dance steps. He's the age that he is, and he can outdance a 20-year-old.
He just like dance like a snake, you know, like you like to watch him dance because you're thinking, where did he get those moves from?
I think the hardest thing for him was when Lee passed away. But I have to tell you, Greg was at the hospital every other day. You know, he just sat with him and he held his hand and he reminded him of the things they used to do together.
He held Lee's hand and told Lee, you know, talking to Lee. Lee was just breathing, but not, I don't know, I think he was listening, you know. But was telling him that it'll be all right. You go to heaven. When you go to heaven, you'll see my mom and dad up there, and they will look after you. I just tried very hard not to cry, but he made a really nice speech. And you know, you say hi to them for me, and don't worry about anything because they will take care of you. And then after that, I'll be, you know, coming after you. So you'll be all right. And trying to, you know, just massage his forehead and talking to him. And I was like, wow.
You know, we all grow, we age, and you have your aches and your pains and whatnot. I think with Greg, he just doesn't accept all that gracefully. I've never thought of Greg as not capable. You know, I just always thought that we were kind of honored to be able to be the person to provide service to him. Because I know that we support him, but I think he gives back so much more, you know.
Shangri-La was able to serve Greg right to the end with when he developed dementia, that he was able to be cared for still under the auspices of Shangri-La. He was able to live until the day he died in his home that was, you know, and cared for by very loving staff. It was wonderful.